The gym was a cathedral of modern fitness, a sanctum of gleaming chrome and roaring bass-heavy beats where the air itself was thick with the sharp, sterile scent of effort and disinfectant. This was the undisputed domain of digital deities like Lars the Leviathan, a man whose physique was a chiseled testament to protein synthesis, and Chloe the Catalyst, a whirlwind of kinetic grace. They were sculptures of marble and lightning, their every rep a performance, their every grunt a soliloquy for the camera. Their feats? 300-pound deadlifts that bent steel bars, gravity-defying muscle-ups on gymnastics rings, were epic poems broadcast to an audience of millions. And then there was Anatoly. He didn't have a flashy nickname, he was simply Anatoly. A man built like an old oak tree, solid, gnarled, and possessing a quiet, deep-rooted strength that asked for no admiration. His gym was the world itself, under an open sky. He lifted rain-soaked logs, hauled field stones into walls, and carried 80-pound sacks of concrete as if they were pillows filled with down. His hands were a topographical map of a life of labor, calloused and permanently etched with soil. One day, drawn by the spectacle like a botanist to an exotic hothouse flower, Anatoly wandered into the chrome cathedral. He stood in the periphery, a still point in the world of motion, and watched silently as Lars finished a thunderous set of clean and presses with a pair of 40-kilogram kettlebells. Lars dropped them with a theatrical, earth-shaking crash, unleashing a primal roar for his camera's blinking red light. "Impressive," Anatoly said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like stones shifting deep underground. Lars turned, his face slick with the sheen of performative sweat. "Thanks, man. It's all about functional strength, you know, being ready for anything life throws at you." Anatoly's eyes, the color of weathered bark, crinkled at the corners. He nodded slowly, a faint knowing smile playing on his lips. "Anything. Interesting." He excused himself with a small, old-world gesture and walked out. The influencers exchanged amused, condescending glances. A curious character, they thought, a relic from a bygone era, probably just an awestruck fan. He returned 10 minutes later, and a confused silence descended, smothering the music. In his work-roughened hand was a simple, wooden-handed mop, the kind you'd find forgotten in a janitor's closet. Tucked under his arm was a single, formidable 32-kilogram bumper plate, a dense circle of black iron. "Anatoly, what's with the mop?" Chloe asked, her perfectly sculpted brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "A challenge," he said, the words simple and unadorned. He proceeded to slide the heavy plate onto the mop head, securing it with a heavy-duty clamp he'd produced from his pocket. The slender mop handle bowed into a strained parabola under the weight, the head drooping like a monstrous metallic flower on a dying stem. One clean and press. Let's see who is truly ready for anything. Lars laughed first, a booming, confident sound that echoed off the mirrors. "You're joking. That's not strength. That's a circus trick. It's unbalanced. It's impractical." "Life is full of circus tricks," Anatoly replied, his serene smile unwavering. "Not everything you need to lift has a perfect knurled handle. Some loads are awkward, and some burdens swing back." Ego, as it always does, took the bait. Lars went first. He approached the mop with the same aggressive bravado he used for a perfectly balanced barbell. But the moment his chalked hands gripped the smooth, unpredictably rotating wood, his confidence shattered. The weight was a chaotic pendulum at the end of a long, flexible lever. As he tried to explosively pull it to his shoulder, the mop hair wobbled with violent, anarchic energy, pulling him wildly off balance. The 32 kilograms felt like 100. He strained, his face purpling with a mix of effort and humiliation, and had to bail out, the mop clattering to the floor like a symbol of his hubris. Chloe, more analytical and precise, tried next. She studied the apparatus, focused on her grip, and braced her core. With a controlled heave, she managed to clean the wobbling mass to her shoulder. But the unstable swinging torque made her entire body tremble like a plucked string. Pushing the chaotic weight overhead was an impossibility. The unbalanced force threatened to wrench her shoulder from its socket. She lowered it with deliberate care, breathing heavily, a new, profound respect dawning in her eyes as she looked from the humble mop to the even humbler man. One by one, the other titans of the gym stepped forward, and one by one they were humbled. This mop, this absurd, mundane object, had become the ultimate crucible. It wasn't a test of raw, isolated power. It was a test of integrated, adaptive strength, of control, finesse, and an intimate, hard-won understanding of leverage. Their faces, no longer masks of invincibility, told the story, not of simple failure, but of a fundamental, paradigm-shifting lesson being seared into their consciousness. They were specialists, masters of a single polished verse, in a world that demanded the gritty, unpredictable prose of a generalist.
Finally, all eyes turned to Anatoly. The air, once thick with beats and bravado, was now still and silent, heavy with anticipation. He stepped up to the mop not as an adversary seeking to conquer it, but as a partner engaging with it. He didn't see a problem. He saw a puzzle he had already solved 1,000 times in 1,000 different forms, in the awkward heft of a waterlogged log, in the shifting weight of a stone wall, in the unwieldy bulk of a furniture crate. His hands, a network of calluses and earned wisdom, found their place on the smooth wood not with a crushing, desperate grip, but with a firm, guiding one, as if greeting an old acquaintance. He took a single, centering breath, a quiet anchor in the tension of the room. Then, in one fluid, almost gentle motion that was the antithesis of their explosive efforts, he cleanly guided the wobbling, chaotic mass to his shoulder. He didn't fight its imbalance. He absorbed it into his own center of gravity, his body becoming a stable pillar in the chaotic system. There was no strain on his face, only a deep, unwavering focus, the look of a man completely immersed in his element. A slight dip of the knees, a powerful, coiled drive from his hips, the same engine that powered shovels and wheelbarrows, and the 32-kilogram mop sailed overhead, as if it were weightless, a feather guided by an unseen hand. He locked it out perfectly steady, the drooping mop head now a silent, triumphant flag proclaiming his practical sovereignty. He held it for a 3 count, a duration that felt like an eternity, a living monument to a different kind of strength. Then, with the reverence and control of a master craftsman setting down a precious, irreplaceable tool, he lowered the apparatus back to the floor without a sound. The gym was plunged into an absolute cathedral silence. The roaring music had been killed, and the only sound was the low, persistent hum of the ventilation system, a mechanical breath that seemed to underscore the stillness. The air, once charged with competitive adrenaline, now felt heavy, contemplative, as if the very space was holding its breath. Mirrors reflected not triumphant poses, but stunned faces and slack jaws, each person trapped in their own private reckoning. Then, a single, deliberate clap fractured the quiet. It came from Lars. His hands, which had moments ago failed to conquer the mundane object, now came together in a slow, resonant rhythm. The arrogant glint in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a raw, unvarnished respect that seemed to age him. He wasn't applauding a victory over himself. He was acknowledging a truth he had never been taught. One by one, the others joined. Chloe, her brow still furrowed, not in confusion, but in deep analysis, began to clap, her movements precise, as if processing each clap as a data point in a new theory of strength. Soon, the entire space was filled not with a roaring ovation, but with a thick, percussive wave of acknowledgement. It was the sound of paradigm shattering. Anatoly stood in the center of it, as still and unassuming as he had entered. He did not puff out his chest or raise his arms. Instead, he slowly, carefully, bent down and set the mop down with a gentleness that bordered on reverence. The clink of the weight plate meeting the floor was a soft, final period at the end of his unspoken lecture. His gaze found Lars, and he held it. There was no "I told you so" in his weathered eyes, no spark of triumph. There was only a deep, abiding certainty, the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman who has successfully demonstrated his craft. "Functional strength," he said, his voice that same gravelly rumble, now filling the silent hall. He was echoing Lars's words, but the term now felt transformed, stripped of its marketing sheen and filled with a gritty, practical truth. It is not for the gym. It is not for the mirrors or the cameras. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the gleaming equipment. It is for the moment when the world, in its infinite and peculiar wisdom, hands you a heavy, awkward, and profoundly unbalanced problem. And sometimes, he concluded, the faint, knowing smile returning to crease the corners of his eyes, the world does not hand you a perfectly knurled barbell. Sometimes, the world hands you a mop. He offered a single, simple nod, a gesture of mutual understanding that transcended the need for words. It was a nod from one practitioner to others, a passing of the torch not of victory, but of perspective. Then he turned. His worn work boots made no sound on the rubberized floor as he walked past the racks of dumbbells, the silent treadmills, and the bewildered titans of this chrome kingdom. He pushed the glass door open and stepped out, leaving the cathedral of curated fitness behind.
The door sighed shut, sealing the room once more, but the man was gone, leaving in his wake a vacuum that was immediately filled with a humbled silence. The kings and queens of this domain stood dethroned, not by a greater brute, but by a profound and simple wisdom delivered by a groundskeeper and a janitor's tool, a lesson they would never, could never, forget. The realization settled upon them not as a single blow, but as a slow dawning tide. True strength, they now understood, was not merely a metric of pounds on a bar or a count of followers on a screen. It was not just about what you could lift. It was about the resilience to adapt, the wisdom to absorb chaos, the grace to find stability, not in perfect, controlled conditions, but in the messy, unbalanced, and mop-like challenges of the real world. It was the strength to handle what life actually throws at you, not what you carefully select for yourself.